Hello everyone, thanks for joining our session, and today we're going to be looking at Salesforce data integrity testing with Tricentis Tosca. So first we saw Salesforce acquire Tableau, and now Salesforce has extended their partnership with Snowflake. And at Tricentis we're super excited about this, and that's because we've already been automating these applications and data sources for some time. And now our Salesforce customers have a comprehensive solution to do real end-to-end testing across their entire Salesforce landscape. And this is really important because the more data moves and transforms, the more we need to test our data integrity. Because this is what we use to make all our financial decisions. And who's going to test all this? Well, the dev and the QA team test the UI and API of their customized Salesforce instance, either manually or using some script-based tools. And they may not work directly with them, but there's another team of data engineers or data stewards that test the data layer, which in this case is Snowflake. And they have to build and maintain long, complex SQL queries. And then we have the business analysts that check the reports that come out on the end, which is Tableau. And if they find issues, they need to go back to the data engineers and get them to debug this. The problems they face is that script-based tools require technical skills, and multiple tools used by different teams lead to communication breakdowns. And there's huge efforts needed to build and maintain integrations for end-to-end testing and reporting. So this end-to-end testing basically just doesn't happen. So we need a model-based approach for automated testing. This allows teams with any skills to automate tests independently, and then we can string our process together in a single execution for end-to-end continuous testing. This is what Tricentis Tosca provides. We support the largest number of technologies out of the box for end-to-end testing, covering UI, API, and DI, data integrity or your data layer. This allows our Salesforce customers to automate their UI tests across Classic, Lightning, which are highly customizable, and include third-party extensions and add-ons. We have comprehensive API support, so any application that exposes their API, such as Salesforce and Tableau, allows us to automate through these APIs to shift left and take advantage of APIs' more stable, less maintenance, and faster execution times. And the highlight of today's session, now that Snowflake offers this new connector with Salesforce, we can also test the data layer, ensuring that the data imported into Salesforce is correct as it's aggregated and transformed in Snowflake and then displayed in Tableau reports, ensuring that the decisions we make is based on accurate data. Tosca has a layered approach. We set up tests as early as possible to catch defects as they occur. We do this through the UI, API, and data layer, but then assemble all these tests to run in the order of your process, which can be executed manually by schedulers or integrated into your existing build pipelines. So in our example, we have a number of flat files received from various sources, but before we import these into Salesforce, we use our DI component to check the flat files metadata and formatting is accurate. I've automated a contact file being imported into Salesforce through the UI, but will also show how we can create and verify new leads through both the UI and API. We first check the data imported into Snowflake's database for completeness, correctness, and integrity against the original flat files. And then we look at the actual data itself and ensure it's complete and correctly loaded row by row. And now we can run reports on this aggregated data using Tableau. Most important of all, we automate this entire process using our business-readable model-based automation. Now let's see Tricentis Tosca in action. So now we're looking at my desktop and we're going to have a look at my environment and data before we jump in. And you can see I've got a number of Salesforce CSV files that I found, which I'm using, and I'm going to use the contact information. I'll open it up so you can have a quick look there. Just a bunch of data I found for different contacts. We're going to load that up into Salesforce and automate that. If I collapse that, let's look at my Salesforce instance. I have my own Salesforce Lightning instance here. There's the contacts. I'm going to load them some more up along the way. We're going to automate across the UI and API of Salesforce. We're going to automate across the data layer of Snowflake. Here's my instance. And across the UI and API of Tableau as well. And you can see in this case, if I click on data sources, it's pointing to my Snowflake instance. So they all have connectors to each other, which is great for our existing customers to take advantage of this end-to-end flow, and Tosca can automate across all of these. So I'm going to log out because our building blocks, because our starting point is really our automation. So how do we automate all these technologies? And to give you a very quick overview is to show you how would we log into Tableau. I've opened up Tricentis Tosca over here. You can see on the left my navigation, different folders, different sections. We're only going to focus on a few today. But if I select my sandbox over here, the way we automate is we scan your application, whether it's web-based, UI, API, the client. I'll select a scanner, and we create this reusable model. So if there's ever a change coming along the way, we can jump back to this model, update it there, and this model would be reused in hundreds of other tests, but the maintenance is in one single place. I scan my application. Again, whatever the technology is, we can handle that out of the box. And in this case, I'm simply just going to select some controls from the screen. So in order to log into Tableau, I need to enter my username, my password. I'm just going to tick a few other controls here so you can see it's grabbing anything else on the screen. And it creates this reusable model in order for us to automate. I hit the finish button and close it. And now Tosca has what it needs to interact with the Tableau application. No scripting or anything like that required. I drag and drop it into the blue section. I have a test case, and now I can populate my information over here. I'm going to start off by just saying, here's my email address. I'm going to pause my screen for a second while I do my password. And this is an automated test logging into Tableau for me. I can run that, and we can see straight away it works. So this is how we work across all technologies. We scan, we create a model, and we drag and drop, and we enter the data. And this is what our automation looks like, and this is why it does very well in enterprise organizations across different teams, different technologies, because there's no technical skills required. Okay, so it's logged in for me. Now, how would we do Salesforce? The great thing about Salesforce is we've been partners with them for a number of years, so we have our own dedicated Salesforce scanner specific to them. We don't have to go screen by screen like we do with other technologies. You've seen how easy it is, but with Salesforce it's even easier. We can scan your entire customized instance and create models all in a few clicks. So I'm going to pause my screen again and use my second monitor to grab my password information. Okay, and we're back. I enter my information. Okay, and what it's going to do is instead of going screen by screen, I can now just select the actual sections within Salesforce that I want to automate. So I mentioned contacts. We're going to do some with leads as well. I'll skip one there, but I can scan it, and what you'll see is Tosca will scan the entire config of Salesforce and create models for all your sections. So you can see how this is really going to accelerate my automation. We've had this for a number of years. It works amazing. And the great thing is now is any changes, you just jump back to the model, you do a rescan, you update it based on the latest change or build, and all the test cases get updated automatically because it's just a reference of that model. I can drag that into my test here like we did with Tableau, and you can see it's there as well. Now we do this across all technologies. I'll grab a few more examples. You can see .NET, Java, SAP, mainframe. I'm going to grab SAP, mainframe, and some REST models over there for API automation, just so you can see more of the usability across all these technologies. And I'm just going to expand my test so you can get this view. It's in plain English. You can enter the information. I can say order number OR, sales org 1000. You can go to a mainframe application, maybe verify some information on job running. Go to column 1, row 1. Maybe you want to verify it's finished. Just making some stuff up along the way, but the important thing to notice is look at the usability. It's all in plain English, and we're going across some very complex technologies. When you're automating across mainframes and web APIs, it can get very difficult for end users. So this really simplifies it by using this scan, drag, and drop approach. Okay. So now we have a test covering different technologies. This is how we do end-to-end automation across your process. And then, of course, let me collapse some of these. When you want to run the same test multiple times, we basically create a data-driven test. So we drag it from the blue section, we drop it in the red section. It's going to automatically create a data sheet, automatically convert the test into a template So again, we have a single point of maintenance. I'm going to hit the refresh button here. You can see it's converted into a template. It's pulled out the data from the actual test that I entered, put it in this test sheet over here. And you can see over there, there's my information here. So you can see now if I want to run the same test multiple times, I can copy, and we have a number of different tests. So if I come over here, Tosca will take the data from the datasheet and create multiple tests for me. So that's what we mean by the same models we reuse multiple times in different ways. And we can even say, have a template to reduce maintenance and change the data out. And we can swap the flow as well as needed. But our maintenance is in a single place. If it's the technical side, we go to the models. And if it's just the data, we come to the test sheet here. And you can see a nice example here. If I change this to RO, go back to my test case here. Let's take the first one. Change it to RO. All I have to do is go to the folder, tell Tosca, go through all my tests and update based on my change, and it'll pull that change through. So that's a very short overview on Tosca and our UI and API automation. How does this work when it comes to the data layer? Now, the cool thing here is you don't need to scan and create models on the data side. If I come over here, we have out-of-the-box models that are provided. So the most commonly used one is row-by-row comparison. And in my case, if I open these two up, there's a model pre-built that allows me to point to a source, point to a target, and compare two sets of data. In my case, I'm going to point to a local file and compare it to a database, which would be Snowflake. So I drag and drop this model and I use it, point it to the right instances with my right information, and I can compare data on a large scale. You can see we have other native connections, but everything can be basically done within these out-of-the-box models. You can load multiple sources if you want to combine 4 or 5 different XML and JSON files and then compare it to a database. All that functionality exists in these models, so you don't have to worry about creating and maintaining these models. Tricentis does that for you. But you can see here, I can still drag and drop that model into my template, and it's there just like any other test. It's business readable, and you can open it up and point it to the source and target. Okay. So for the data integrity side, all the models are pre-built. You don't have to worry about that. And you also don't have to worry about a lot of the different types of tests. So one of the tests we're going to do today is point to a single database, which will be Snowflake, and run some tests on it. So if you open this up over here, you can see we have some out-of-the-box tests that say point to a database and check for nullness, for uniqueness, check for the row counts above 0. So you can set up all these generic or specific tests to your environment and have them in these templates. And then we have a nice wizard that will actually drive the creation and the maintenance of these tests later. And you have full control of these tests. So for example, there's some tests I've created, but I'm going to check that out. And let's say I wanted to create a new one for today using Snowflake. There's one I created there for checking for a valid date format. I'm going to copy paste it, and we have a new one for today. I can call it demo SQL template. And I can come into this template, expand it here, and write my own query, for example, over here, or change it and make it more specific, say where date equals, and use some dynamic expressions over here. The main thing is it's all template driven so that the maintenance is reduced later. And this is why a lot of testing gets missed on the data side, because the creation and the maintenance is just too much effort to do manually. And when it comes to other tools, especially script-based, again, too much work. They can't maintain it on a large scale. So the model-based approach really helps address that. So what we're going to do now is look at our Salesforce example. For that, we're going to go to our Salesforce tab. I've set everything up in different folders as teams would do it individually, and then I've combined it into an overall execution. So if I start off here and go to my execution list, we can see all the different folders that relate to these different sections here, which have all the tests, the templates, and the data sheets that I use to create them. We can report on tests by execution, pass and fails, as you can see here, and we can also report on the business risk being covered. So we can prioritize our requirements and tests based on the frequency and damage and give us a more meaningful report on what state the environment is based on the last execution. So if I collapse all these, we can start off by just going through them. I've already created these, but I wanted to at least show you a preview of how I created them. So I'm going to select this empty folder here, and you can see the wizard that actually creates and maintains tests on a large scale for the data layer. If I select file, I can load up my CSV file, and all the wizards will look the same. You'll point to a file, point to a database, or a combination of the two, and select these out-of-the-box tests or tests you've customized and created yourself. So I'm going to load up my CSV file here. You can see the first row is header, comma separated, and now I get a nice preview of my actual file based on my business rules or the rules defined by Salesforce or your customizations. You can set up tests now. I'm going to go through this pretty quick and just set up, but as I'm doing these ticks, this is what each tick box is creating a test for me. So for example, city might have no empty values. Maybe you want a min-length check, there's at least 3 characters, and the maximum of say 35, for example. We have country, reason, maybe you want to check that it's a valid state, so you can provide a value range. You can see separated by semicolon. I've got all the states here, so I'm just going to copy those, paste it in there, and we can keep going and then keep adding different tests along the way. Here's a date format over here, so you can write your own date formats if you want. I won't do that for today, but all of that's possible. As I go down, you can see here, same with emails, you can set up different date formats if you want to do those sort of checks. But what I wanted to do is, there is a zip code over here. Let's say, again, just check for numerics. Let's check to use unique. That's not correct, but just so you can see a different test being created over there. And we can go through and create as many as we need from that side. But I'll jump up to the top. Let me hit the next button. These are my templates. Again, you can create your own custom ones with additional tests built onto our tests that we provide out of the box. And we can automatically create execution lists and requirements to tie them back to. So what you'll see is with those few clicks, it's created 13 tests. One is just to load the file into a caching database, and the rest will do the actual tests. So I'll jump through them quickly, and like you saw me create templates and data sheets manually, this is all automatic. So if I jump to the actual test, there's my actual test it's going to run, and because it's a pre-built model, we're not going to see a lot, but we'll just see the value range that I put in here. But you will see the template over here. That's all parameterized based on this data sheet, which it's auto-created for me. So I can even come in here and say, let's say there's now a 51st state. Let's make one up, ZZZ. Come back to my template folder over here, tell Tosca, go update all my tests based on this change. And it's going to do that for me there. There's ZZZ over there. So same as manual, except it's all automatically driven by these wizards up here. And we can do this on a large scale, hundreds and thousands even of tests can be created. And these are tests that generally you're not running manually because they're too time consuming. Let's close that down and go through. So these are all the actual UI and API tests. I've automated actually Tosca to go through and actually import the file. Normally your batch or something would do that, but it's pretty cool to show because we can automate pretty much anything. So it's going to log into Salesforce. It's going to load up that CSV file. I've now done some navigation, pointed to the file, and then it's going to load it up and update all my existing contacts based on that. But you can see it's quite a straightforward test. Let's just bring that into range. All the interactions, the inputs, and the file types along the way, verification checks as well. Here's a nice one via API. So there's a test via UI, which will obviously take some time to create and verify a lead, but you can also do it via API, which is just a fraction of the amount of tests because it's just doing request response. So this one's just basically going to grab some fake data. It's all parameterized and configuration parameters for our authentication. And it's going to create these leads via API, which is done extremely fast. So if you want to test a lot of business logic very quickly, the APIs are stable and definitely the way to go. So we'll run those in execution so you can see them. Here are some more warehouse tests where I've actually pointed to the Snowflake instance. I'll just show you very quick how I did that. If I double click on here, I'm not going to do the full connection, but just so you can see, if I point to my Snowflake instance, I can say connect. It's going to go off, grab all the information it needs from Snowflake. And just like we select the test before for the file, we can go through the wizard and select the test, and it generates for these. If you're selecting from source to target, you'll have an additional one here for target, and you'll map the columns. Because of time, I'm not going to show that today, but just you can see we can connect to data sources wherever they are and run these tests. Let's collapse that. Now the row by row comparison. This is obviously something everyone's interested in. The data itself. This was more the metadata, the formatting, referential integrity, those sort of checks we want to do to catch bugs early. This is the data itself. Pointing to the file, you can see you can parameterize your connection, and you can say which area, which type of connection you want to use. And if I come over here, you can see I've mapped from source to target. The columns have changed, so I've taken care of that without scripting, trimming some double quotes off the headers. We have a bunch of transformations, or we can take care of out of the box within the module. And then, of course, you can add your own SQL queries as well if you need to. But then we parameterize these queries at the end into these data sheets so that the maintenance is addressed. Here's some row keys. We're excluding some columns, and it's creating a nice HTML report outside of Tosca. All the logs are in the execution report. It's a bit more high level. If you want to see the data, these are the reports are the way to go. We'll have a look at that too. If I come over here, now we're looking at Tableau. And let me just collapse this one. We're going to go log into Tableau just like we did before. Let's expand this. Open up the browser to my instance, log in, navigate, apply some filters to the data, and instead of pulling the data from the screen, because it'll be all over in charts, we can actually just pull the data down into a file and then use my row by row comparison module to compare the file to the data that's actually in Snowflake. I'll show you that after the execution, but that's pretty cool as well. And Tableau as well has an API. We can, of course, do the same thing via API as well. So hopefully you're seeing a nice range of all these different technologies that we can automate, and it's all the same user look and feel on the blue section over here, because the modules is how we interact with the actual applications or data sources, and Tosca takes care of that for the end user. So now let's run all these. If I jump over here, I'm going to run all these. Let's close down my browser. This is my Snowflake instance. And let's kick off our execution list. So I'll navigate to my report section. And it's going to start off by pulling the actual CSV file for the contacts, doing some checks on it. You can see it's happening pretty fast, and it's all happening in the background. And then it'll hit our UI test, where it'll actually, once it's happy with the file, load it up into Salesforce from that side. So we've logged in through the browser again, and what it's going to do is go to the actual import and load up that file, map the actual fields. Generally, this would happen by a batch job or some other way, but it's nice just to show you we can automate pretty much anything. So if you are updating your contacts with third-party files that are coming in, maybe it's a manual task, and we can actually automate that for you as part of the process as well. So you can see over here, we're just going to select the standard objects. I'm going to use the update function because I've updated these contacts before. So it's going to load up the file, go through all the checks, map the actual fields as needed. I've just got 6 that I've actually set up that will be automatically mapped, and then it'll finish. And it's verifying along the way, checking messages as well as it goes through. But you can see just going through the UI, it's fine, it's stable, it's required to test the UI, but if there's an API, we would always prefer to grab that API, especially when we're doing the business logic and you have large volumes of data variations. The API is definitely the way to go to get those tests done, and then we use the UI to test the functionality and the actual interface and see if everything's up and running correctly from that side. So that's kind of finished over there. What we can do now is it'll jump to the next test, which you should see it'll do some API tests in the background. It will also start running our SQL querying in batches as well. So you'll see there at the bottom as the tests start ticking away, and there we go. I can see it started. So I'm running them in parallel, and this was for the actual tests it's running on the Snowflake directly from that side. And what you'll see is it starts going faster and faster. So it starts a little slow, but there's different parallel executions that are starting up as well. So for large volumes, you'll really see the value of the performance there. Here it's not that many tests, it's probably a couple hundred. So by the time it starts up, it's almost finished, but for large volumes, you'll see that difference. APIs are pretty fast, and at the end, you'll see the UI automation running as well. And you see along the way, it's going to actually create a file from Tableau. It should automatically bring it into view. Let's give it a second for it to do that. It's still logging in. There we go. It's going to generate the report. We could pull the values from the report, but really a more stable way is via API. Or in my case, I'm actually just going to download the actual results, which we've applied filters to it already, as a CSV file. So it's the exact same data. It's just in a nice CSV format, which is a lot easier to read and more stable and faster when it comes to automation. In this CSV, you'll see afterwards, I've run a similar query on Snowflake and using the row by row comparison to compare the two sets of data again. So there we go, there's the CSV. There'll be one more report. You can see the little execution engine pops up every now and then as it needs to. Different engines that come in as whenever they needed. So let's go through quick. I won't go through all of them because there's quite a lot here, but it's run all the quick checks for the actual CSV file. Then it went to the UI and it imported some Salesforce contacts, doing some verifications along the way. Sometimes they pass, sometimes they fail. Have a look at the APIs. It takes a couple of seconds for these tests to run. So much faster than the UI from that side. Let's go through here. These are the other tests. There was about 56 of them over there. Sorry, 54 of them over there that ran in parallel. It wasn't too many in the end. And let's close that up. The row by row comparisons. Let's get to my latest execution list. These ran, there was 157 records. You can see all the data there. We can run reports on a large scale over here, on a high level. And it's got all the logs, very important for auditing and everything else. But what it also generates at runtime is this more easy to read HTML report. There's my 157 contacts that were uploaded. There's the columns that had issues, and I set up a lot of these as failures myself. We pointed to a flat file, we pointed to Snowflake, and there's some differences. It's giving me the first 5 records. I can grab the first 20 or all of them if I want. And as you scroll through, you'll see row by row where the actual differences along the way. So very easy to figure out where it went wrong. And you can see where data is only in source, only in target, invalid, number of other options there. Let's close that one down. At the end, it basically ran a flat file. It created this flat file from Tableau. That was from that graph by applying a number of filters. And this is the actual data it pulled back from that side. And what you'll see is I ran the same query in Snowflake. So if I come back to Tosca here, let's go to this last one, jump over here, and I'm not interested in how we saved the data, but the comparison. Here's my query. And we have the SQL editor here as well, so you can connect to different data sources all within Tosca and test out your queries before running your tests without having to go directly to the different editors for different data sources. So there's our execution list, and again, based on this execution, it's going to create this risk-based reporting for us, combining all our different layers together from that side. So hopefully that gave you a good idea or an overview of how we do end-to-end automation across your landscape, wherever it is, whether we have to use UI, API, or the data layer, we can access the data and set up the tests from that side. So unfortunately, we're out of time, but for everyone that sent through questions, we'll contact you separately by email and get back to you. And for everyone else, please contact us through our website for any other questions. Happy to set up a call or demo so we can do a deep dive into your area of interest. Thanks for watching today.